All right, all right. Welcome back to Eyes Open Media. Prophet John here. Okay, so we're getting a lot of discussions about race, racism, racists, and things like that. People have changed the definition of things over time because they just either to continue their propaganda or to just make things divided and worse upon the land and pursuing their new world order agenda. They had to change some definitions, change some stuff, make racist. You're a racism and all this stupid stuff. It has nothing to do with what they're talking about now. It didn't have. It wasn't that way. When these things were created or these things were taught about, they have different meanings now than they did back then. And I put on there on Twitter here racism. Like, do you guys hear the word racism? Right, racist. Right. There's a race, racism, racist. There's one key word in there, right? Race. What do we know? What a race is? It's not race isn't skin and all this other stupid stuff. Race is a actual race, meaning I'm going to beat you to the finish line. It's a race, right? It's a race to the finish line. It's a race to do something. It's not skin or anything having to do with skin or your background. They flipped they have flipped everything on us on purpose, by the way, because they knew it was going to bring out protests and all this stupid stuff in the future. But when these things were created or talked about, especially back in the European times, it wasn't about that. It was a race, actual race to do something. Okay. When the Arabs, and one of the things we don't talk about a lot is the Arab nations that enslaved that have been enslaving people, and they enslaved the Caucasians. I mean, Arabs enslaved Caucasians, they've enslaved Asians, they have enslaved Africans, they have enslaved the other Arabs, right? They still enslave Africans right now in Libya, where they're still being slaved and auctioned off right now in Middle East countries, and no one's talking about that. So, and I've talked about it maybe a few times, but we need to put some light on what's going on there because yes, we're dealing with what we've went through with 400 years, what the ADOS people have gone through and African Americans and things like that. But in the Middle East right now, they're still auctioning off slaves in some of these countries. So it's disgusting. Okay, so we don't talk a lot about what the Arabs have done as well. So that is something that needs to change. We need to highlight what the Arabs are doing, and Arabs need to get on it and say that you cannot do that any longer. Okay, so there's a lot of Arabs that are good people. And I got a lot of Arab friends here. I used to live in the Middle East, right? So, and I used to live in Dubai. I used to live. For people that don't know, I used to live in Dubai. I used to live in Bahrain. Okay, and been around and seen a lot in the Middle East. So but the Arabs out there need to get it together. They need to come together. And the only the hard part about the Arabs is that there's so many there's so much propaganda and so much corruption and so much evil in these countries that they can't even help other countries because they're dealing with a lot of stuff that the Western world has put on them, right? Even in China and other in Germany and all these Russia, like all these countries have come in there into the Middle East and created havoc into the Middle East to keep it busy. While these countries then are able to focus on running the world and bringing in their new world order, they've kept the Middle East busy, right? And so the Middle East is dealing with a lot right now, and we pray for them. But there is slavery happening right now in the Middle East, right? And no one wants to talk about that. The media will not cover that stuff. They will not cover, maybe because it's a deep state operation or New World Order type stuff. I don't know what it is. They won't cover it. Okay. So, they're talking about all these companies, all these Fortune 500 companies. We stand with black people and Black Lives Matter, but yet down there in Libya and other places in the Middle East, African Americans or Africans, excuse me, and Arab Africans, right? Or Arab. I'm not sure how you call those. I mean, when you're mixed with African and Arab, I'm not sure what you're called. But they're being auctioned off as slaves, and no one wants to talk about that. So I wanted to highlight that and bring that up this morning, so you guys can do your research on that and maybe try to help. Maybe there's organizations that you can help, that can help these people out right down there to stop that. Okay. And so I put on here that racism was a race by European country leaders to find new land to build new colonies using slaves. Had nothing to do with skin color. Okay, the world is a lie and stage. So they flipped it. They flipped it into skin color and all these other stupid stuff. Right? You're racist. You're this and you're that. Right? But the original thing for racism and things like that was it was just a race. It was a race between leaders, European leaders, to find new land using slaves to build up their land. Right? To build up their empires and their new colonies, and that's because the Arabs were doing slavery back then. Remember, so the Arabs were doing slaves, and they were having the slaves build their land. Build their land and build their things for them. And remember, and I guess they remember Pharaoh doing the same thing, right? So in Egypt, so Pharaoh and all these people were doing that, and then the Arabs started having slaves, and they were doing that, and the slaves would work for them and pump the I guess pump the oil and thing or whatever they were doing down there in the Middle East. And so the Europeans were like, man, we could find let's go find some new land and get some slaves and have them build up the new land for us. And now we call it new land, but technically it wasn't new land, right? I'm gonna do a video on that as well, because a lot of you guys don't even know that all the continents were together at one point. Like literally, a lot of you people don't even know that. A lot of you people don't even know that everything was Africa or whatever they called it before Africa, because it wasn't called Africa all the whole time. Okay, so people don't know anything. I swear, man. There's people out here that don't know nothing. They don't care. They really don't care about their history or anything. They don't even know that all the planets were combined together at one point, and everything was Africa. That's how you have the promised land in Africa. Everything was in Africa until the great earthquakes split the continents. People don't even know that. Golly. Everything was Africa, right? Or whatever they called it before Africa, until the earthquakes happened and they split the land. That's one of the and I'm going to tell you guys something. I'm going to tell you guys something, because I went to college and I did all that blah 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 blah, and most of the stuff was bull crap. By the way, in college, I aced college because it was all bull crap. See, if college was actually true, I probably would have struggled in it, right? Because truth is hard. Truth is harder than lies, right? So if when college is all bull crap and false, it's easy, and I aced college. I didn't have any problem. I think I'm not even sure what my grade point average is. 4 point something, 4.6, 4.7, 4 points. I don't know what it was, but I aced college because college was a complete bull crap. It was a complete lie, and I struggled to try to keep my mouth shut. I'm like, nope, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. Especially in like something like geography and land stuff and history. Like, oh my god, the lies that they were telling is just unbelievable, right? The continents were all together at one point, right? Earth was just one big continent with a whole bunch of land, with a whole bunch of water around it, right? Everything, all the continents were in Africa, or were Africa. So you could literally just walk everywhere. That's why they did in the Bible, right? In the Bible, they didn't, a lot of times you didn't hear them talk about, yeah, we're taking a ship all the way down to Europe. No, they literally they walk from this place to this land to that land to that. They could just walk everywhere because all the continents were together. Right. Oh man. Oh boy. Now and some people are like, "Wow, I didn't even think about that." You can just walk everywhere. You can walk all the way up. You can walk all the way down, right? Because everything, all the continents were together. Yeah, they had some lakes and rivers and things like that, but all the continents were together before the earthquakes happened, right? Um, you know. So now I don't know the time frame of Moses and all these people. You know what I mean? I don't know their time frame. You know, I don't know because I wasn't born there. I don't know their time frame. When Moses and then were on the earth and walking and things like that. I don't know their time. I don't know what time they were, but this is thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Thousands. I mean, this is hundred. This might be 100,000 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a long time. Christ was only 2,000 years ago, right? As we say, 2,000 years ago. We don't do we actually know it was 2,000 years? I don't know, unless you pray about it, and some people have prayed about it, I guess. But but Africans or the tribe of Judah or Yeshua's people, the chosen people, have been were on the planet on planet Earth for thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and it was all one continent. All the continents that you see today were all stuck together, and it was beaming hot. That's the reason why they tell you, well, the Caucasians tell you that they arrived about maybe about 6,000 years ago, and no one even thinks to even hint about that. They're telling you, yeah, we arrived about 6,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago. They're not talking about the African American or the Africans. They're not talking about the Africans, people. The Africans have been here since for 100,000 years ago, man. We've been on planet Earth. It was all of it was Africa. All the continents were combined together until the earthquakes happened. But the Caucasians will tell you, the scientists Caucasians will tell you that, oh no, the Earth started about 6,000, 5,000 years ago. They're telling you when they arrived on Earth. But you don't get that because they won't tell you that part, right? And you Caucasians that are listening to me, you white people that listen to me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I got friends that know it. I got elite friends that know it. I got my own personal team members who know it as well. They're just gonna stay on code though, but they know. They're not stupid people, and you guys shouldn't be either. There's a reason why they tell you that Earth started 6,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago. There's a reason why they're telling you that, because that's when they arrived. They arrived after the earthquakes, right? After the lands were able to move north into colder weathers. Why? Because their skin could not handle the heat, of course. I mean, isn't that common sense? Oh man, this world is so, I mean, the things that they haven't told us is unbelievable. But these are common sense things. If a man with pale skin walks out in Vegas and stands outside in 103-degree weather, he can only stand in that sun for very long before it starts to burn like crazy. So they waited until so there wasn't any Caucasian people on the planet Earth for thousands of years. They're telling you that in the sciences. The scientists are telling you that we arrived about 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. Why? Because all the planets were one in Africa, right? And it was hot. There was no covering, right? Unless you had the clothes and quilts and things like that, right? And there was no coverings, like people were working under Pharaoh in Egypt for what? 12-hour days under 130-degree weather. What type of Caucasian person can stand that sun for 12-hour days without sunscreen, right? Even with sunscreen you still burn, right? I mean, this is common. This should be common sense, but we have lost common sense. So I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna cover that when I do the continent maps video. But this is common. This should be common sense, people. But it's not for some reason. And racism was a race. That's why it's called racism. It was a race. It was a race to find new land, which wasn't new because everything was already, the Africans were already in America before Columbus came, Native Americans, Africans, Mexicans, everybody was already in America. It wasn't new land. It was just new land. I guess it was new once the earthquakes happened. It was just new land for those who didn't know. Right? It was new land for those who didn't know, and it was unfamiliar land for the Africans that went over as slaves because we did as we were when we were slaves, we didn't know about America after the earthquakes. But there was African Americans and Native Americans and the descendants of ADOS people and Mexicans already in America, right? Before when Columbus arrived. We were already here because everything was Africa before the earthquakes. They won't tell you these things. I mean, that should be common sense. Well, it is what it is. Racism is not about the skin color. Racism was a race to find new land to build new colonies using slaves. So, I mean, I don't know, man. It's just the world is just crazy right now. Let me just get off this. Eyes open.